The 2025 Dietary Guidelines in this country is about to make me really upset.
Not again.
Let me explain. Hey everyone, welcome back to Inc. Nutrition. My name is Jack. I'm a registered dietitian, and I am here to help translate the science of nutrition so that you can live a healthier and happier life. Please like, comment, and subscribe for new videos. Wow, I have such a love-hate relationship with the government when it comes to nutrition.
Who doesn't?
So, the Dietary Guidelines for Americans is put out and updated every 5 years, and it really is supposed to help health professionals and policymakers advise Americans on how to just eat healthier and live longer. So of course, I agree with a lot of the guidelines that are currently out there, but the reality is they're behind, and they are just not quite up to date with the latest research and the evidence.
Those are outdated concepts, all right?
Especially when it comes to things like saturated fat and even sugar and alcohol. But today we are going to be talking about processed food. There is nowhere in the current guidelines that make any kind of recommendations about ultra-processed food, and it has been proposed for the 2025-2030 guidelines to start recommending limiting the consumption of those, which of course I wholeheartedly agree with, and I'll tell you why. In my opinion, ultra-processed food is hardly food.
It's garbage.
They're really food-like substances that use synthetically derived ingredients like colors, fillers, emulsifiers, these chemical compounds that you can't even pronounce. And not only do processed foods strip the real thing from all of the beautiful, wonderful, natural nutrients, but these companies also truly formulate these products to be hyper-palatable or addictive. So yes, right, on one hand, less nutritious, more addictive, so you may actually eat more of these empty foods, empty calories. But also, on a mechanism standpoint, really there are three other additional areas that I think are very relevant that are not talked about enough that the research has confirmed. These highly processed foods interact with our endocrine system, right? So they mess our hormones up like leptin, ghrelin, cortisol, etc. They mess up our gut microbiome, okay? They lead to dysbiosis, an imbalance of good and bad bacteria, which leads to a whole host of health problems. And they can increase low-grade inflammation, which is really at the root from most preventable illness. But don't just take my word for it. Let's actually look at the big research. A 2024 high-level evidence summary in the British Medical Journal. We're talking 14 meta-analyses that were looked at. Hundreds of thousands of participants showed that higher exposure to ultra-processed foods was consistently associated with an increased risk of 32 adverse health outcomes. Convincing evidence showed that higher ultra-processed food intake was associated with around a 50% increased risk of cardiovascular disease-related death, a 48 to 53% higher risk of anxiety and common mental disorders, and a 12% greater risk of type 2 diabetes. Another 2020 meta-analysis confirmed the link between ultra-processed food and obesity and gaining weight. There have also been some actual clinical trials that have confirmed this as well, where participants have either eaten a minimally processed diet or a highly processed diet, same calories, same nutrition, and have also gained weight. Finally, a 2023 meta-analysis review looked at 11 studies and stated that the current evidence shows a consistent, significant association between intake of ultra-processed foods and the risk of overall and several cancers, including colorectal, breast, and pancreatic cancer. These are just some of the big research, some of the big studies. If you just go onto PubMed or Google Scholar and look up ultra-processed food and links between all-cause mortality or weight gain or adverse health conditions, you are going to find the evidence, I promise you. But the United States Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, the people that are actually creating these guidelines for the next 5 years, they disagree. They recently put out this statement that there is limited evidence that ultra-processed food consumption is associated with greater adiposity and risk of overweight and obesity. They called for more research before the government would make specific recommendations to limit ultra-processed food intake. This drives me absolutely crazy. The evidence is 100% there. So please, please, please be a critical consumer of information.
Use your brain.
Don't wait until the government decides that the evidence is perfectly crystal clear. By that time, you may already have type 2 diabetes or cancer or mental health issues. I know there's a lot of factors at play with those things, but ultra-processed food consumption is related to all of that. It just is. So one thing that I just want to ask everyone is to just not to blindly trust government recommendations. Do your own research. Now, the 2025-2030 guidelines have not yet been released, so there is still a chance that they will recommend limiting the intake of ultra-processed foods. But also consider, right, about 60% of the total calories that are consumed by the average American are coming from ultra-processed foods. And that's up to 70% in children. So there's a lot of money being made, right, when it comes to just processed foods in general. And so if they make this recommendation to limit, then these huge companies are gonna lose a lot of money. And the reality is that the world is ruled by money, and money drives policy. So it is time to take your health into your own hands, okay? What can you do? First off, what is an ultra-processed food? Probably a lot of you know, maybe some of you don't, but there is a big spectrum of how food is processed. Most food that you're gonna see at the grocery store is already processed, but how processed is it? You can use the NOVA scale to kind of gauge, right, this. There's from 1 to 4. 1 is like unprocessed. You know, we're talking about whole fresh fruit and vegetables and things that don't come in packages at all. And then it goes 2, 3, and then 4 is ultra processed. So maybe let's use an example here. Think about apples. The whole apple itself is going to be a unprocessed food. Sliced apples that are coming maybe in a package are going to be the next class of minimally processed, and then moderately processed would be maybe applesauce with some added cinnamon, and then a class 4 would be that fully processed apple pie that you get from McDonald's. Or you could also look at grains, okay? The whole intact grain itself, quinoa or brown rice, that is unprocessed. And then the next thing would maybe be oatmeal, right? Where the grain is flaked. It still goes through a minimal amount of process, still very healthy, but that would be so class 1 and 2, very good. I recommend those foods. Then class 3 would be, you know, foods like, in terms of the grain world, right? Breads and pastas. It's been milled into flour, turned into a product like that. And then you can go all the way to like breakfast cereals, you know, with a lot of added sugar, very processed food, or like white bread, white bagels that you find in packages at the store, ultra processed. Okay, that gives you some idea of, I guess, the spectrum and how that looks. Other examples of ultra-processed foods: sodas, chips, crackers, lunch meats, other processed meats, a lot of frozen dishes or things that are ready to cook or instant. Stuff that comes in, you know, jars, cans, just packages in general are usually gonna be pretty ultra-processed. And I know in today's world, we cannot completely limit those foods. I don't think you should necessarily completely limit all of that. That's pretty unrealistic, very difficult to do. But if you can bring that 60% down to like 30%, you're gonna do wonderful things for your health, right? Maybe a quarter of all your food that you're eating is processed or ultra processed. I think that's pretty manageable. 2 last quick tips for you. One you probably heard of: shop the perimeter of the grocery store before going into the middle. Okay, you're usually going to fill your grocery cart with most of the fresh foods, the produce and things like that first if you do that. And then also just cook more of your own food. I know we live a very, very busy life, and eating out is of course gonna be common. Just if you can cook the majority of your own food, your health will benefit. Your health begins in your kitchen. Okay, I'm done ranting about, you know, the dietary guidelines. Maybe they'll listen to me. Maybe, you know, in a couple months we will see these recommendations. And I really, really, really hope so. I'm not getting my hopes up too much, which is why I'm trying to educate everyone. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any comments or want me to talk about anything else in the world of nutrition, please drop it below. Please like, subscribe, and I really really enjoy making these videos for everyone. And I'm just trying to help. I'm literally just trying to inform people about the science and how to apply that science in their day-to-day life. Again, my name is Jack. I'm a registered dietitian with Inc. Nutrition. We have an awesome team of dietitians, so if you want to go one-on-one and maybe develop a personalized plan, happy to do so. Just reach out. Thanks so much. Everybody have a delicious day. Thanks. Quite caught up with a lot of the latest research. So yes, on one hand, hardly food to begin with, right? They're food-like